Welcome to Spiritual as Fuck,
Spiritual as Fuck,
a podcast where we explore everything outside of the ordinary. I'm Liz Volpe. I'm a social entrepreneur, now psychic medium, teacher and mentor, with a huge passion to inspire people to dream big and change the world.
I'm Diane Driscoll, a coach, facilitator and speaker. I'm also a psychic intuitive, learning to incorporate my spiritual gifts into my life and business.
We're here today to share real and raw spiritual stories. It's going to give you a safe space to challenge what's normal and have some serious fun along the way.
We hope you're ready to get spiritual as fuck. Some super exciting news to share with you before we launch into this week's episode. Liz and I are introducing a limited edition Spiritual as Fuck t-shirt to commemorate the first year of our Spiritual as Fuck podcast. This is a must-have statement tee for all you spiritual warriors. It makes a fantastic Christmas gift for your like-minded friends, so spread some love and positivity by surprising them with a present that embodies their spiritual as fuck essence. Pre-order now, and delivery is mid-November. Link and details in the show notes. Today, we have the absolute privilege of sharing our interview with world-renowned astrologer Lisa Salvatore. Lisa was recommended to us during our interview with John Edward, as he shared with us what an important role astrology plays in his and his family's life. Lisa is an intuitive and an astrologer. Through her work, she helps open-minded souls to unlock their true potential and live their most authentic life. Lisa helps her clients understand themselves on a much deeper level. She uses her enhanced intuitive abilities and her natural connection to the spirit world to gain tremendous insights, peace and clarity, helping people live this life to its fullest. Lisa has an absolute gift of breaking down the complexity of astrology into the simplest of terms, so grab a cuppa and settle in for a masterclass in astrology. Okay everyone, we are back Spiritual as Fuck, and this time we have such an interesting guest, all the way from the other side of the world. We have Lisa Salvatore. Now, I'm not going to tell you too much right now because we're going to find out a lot here, but we are going to be talking about all things astrology. And let me tell you, I know nothing about astrology apart from the fact that I'm a Taurus.
Oh, me too.
Diane's constantly talking to me about astrological things, which I'm kind of nod along and pretend I know. But the reason why we're here with Lisa today is because a few months ago, we had the pleasure, like everybody knows, because we've spoken about it a lot, of sitting down with the amazing John Edward. And we'd planned all of these questions about his mediumship gifts and his psychic gifts. And there was one message that he just threaded through the entire interview, and that was about astrology. And Lisa, he mentioned you in the middle of that interview. And then after the interview talking, he mentioned you about 5 times more. So we're like, who's this Lisa? We've got to talk to her, because John Edward says he literally makes his decisions based on what you do.
He's so funny. He's great.
Yeah, so we hunted you down. So thank you so much for being with us today. Now, you are an intuitive, you're an astrologer, you do healing. There's a little bit of everything in terms of when we look at your gifts. Let's go all the way back. How on earth did you end up down this path? Was this something that, happened as a child? And I'm going to hand you over to whatever kind of comes through for you to start with.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm a Taurus also. So when you said that, I'm like, me too, I'm a Taurus. But when I was a little girl, I'm one of 5 children, and I'm the 4th one, and we're all pretty close in age. So it was all the boys and then myself. So it was always very loud in our house. There was always a lot of activity. And I just always felt a little different, and not in a bad way. I just knew that I could look at people and feel things in a more elevated manner, I guess you could say. And it apparently runs on my mom's side of the family, although my dad argues that it's also his side of the family. So we still don't really know. But I just knew things. Claircognizance is the technical term for that, where you just kind of know things that go beyond logic. And even sometimes as a child, it would freak me out a little bit, because I could sit next to somebody and feel them, like if they were in pain or if they were happy, I could feel the emotion. And even if they were trying to portray it as if they were okay. I knew I felt the truth, in my soul. And it was powerful, but it was also kind of disturbing at times. And I always just understood the zodiac signs. It was like, how some people are born with a musical ability and they can just play a tune from the age of 3. I feel like with me, understanding the zodiac signs was just inherent. I don't know how I always knew them from a very young age. I knew Taurus, I knew Scorpio, and I knew the characteristics of them just knowing them. And I always loved to read. So from a very young age, so I would just read books upon books upon books about Taurus. And then one day I was reading about how sensitive Taurus can be, and some of the things that the book was saying, which, by the way, a very basic astrology book, which many of the listeners might already have read. It's called Sun Signs by Linda Goodman. It's very, it's a very basic astrology book. A lot of people have read that book. It's very well known, but I digested that book. And through that book, I realized that we actually have a moon sign. And the moon sign, the moon in astrology represents your inner world, where the sun is your outer world, right? And we'll get more into all of that. But when I realized my moon fell in the sign of Pisces, which is probably one of the most emotionally sensitive signs of the zodiac, it just all clicked. And then I had to study everything I could about astrology and learn everybody's birth chart in my family because it made so much sense to me. And you can really digest and not pick apart in a bad way, but you can really sit there and dissect personalities through astrology. And you can understand more of why you act out a certain way because you're hardwired to by the planets. And that doesn't mean that you can't change anything. That simply means we all have this birth chart, which is where the stars were positioned at our exact time of birth. And even if one of us here had the exact same birth data, because of our locations, our charts are going to be totally different, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So it's just you have to think about it in this vast universe. There is no way that any two people, even twins, have slight differences in their astrology chart. And all of these planets have different functions and they run through us as well, since we're all energy, right? And so it's very, very interesting. And this is why I'm always a huge promoter for people to understand their own astrology chart. And even if you don't want to have your own reading, at least understand the basics of your personality, your sun, your moon, and your rising sign. Those are the big 3.
Yeah.
And that will give you so much insight into yourself. And if you're looking at others, into others as well.
Yeah.
That's how my journey
I've ever heard it explained.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I try to make it not as daunting for people because it can be, it is a very complex subject. And I studied it for years before I offered chart readings because I always did psychic tarot readings and I would see the astrological symbols above people's heads. Literally, I would see symbols and planets and I would say things to them and they would say, yes, you're right. Yes, I am Aries. And inside I would, secretly, yes, I knew it. Yes. But then I would say to myself, but now at some point, Lisa, you're going to have to really back this up with the chart. You really need to learn the mathematics. And I do not like math. I got to be honest. My brain doesn't really like math.
I'm with you.
But I made it a point to really, once I locked in, it was years and years of studying. And I'll be honest, I'm still every day trying to perfect my technique on the technical side, because the intuitive side, I feel like is so easy for me to flow right into it, but I want to be able to always back that up with the technical side, because those two together can really take a reading to a whole nother height.
Yeah, and it's so complex. I think that's what I've learned as I have a fragment, like I have a curiosity about astrology. And when I think back to, in my younger days, you'd look in the newspaper and you get your little Pisces, your star sign and read those. And I used to always just think, oh, this is somebody just making stuff up, or that could apply to anyone.
Right.
But the more, I think it was when I went through my spiritual awakening, so much astrological stuff just kept popping up in my path, just started to show up for me. And, knowing that my star sign was Pisces, but then realizing, oh, there's actually, sun, moon, and rising, and I'm Pisces, Aries.
Oh, wow.
And what each one of those actually meant. So when you said moon, Pisces, I feel it. But there's so much, I guess, for something that I consider to be quite, I guess, a little bit of fun, a little bit of playfulness, a little bit of, woo-woo, let's put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
But the
Mm-hmm.
complexity, the technicalities, the years of study that's required. So, people can go out there and they can get an astrological chart done, but, it's the quality of the person and the study that they've done, plus the intuitive gifts, that overlay that you're able to bring to it is like, and hearing you talk, it sounds like you've got so much of that woven into the fabric of your being that the two of those go hand in hand in how you operate. So I would love to know, you use this this phrase, the kind of roadmap to the soul, that your astrological chart is your roadmap to the soul. What does that mean to you, and how would you frame that for our listeners so they can understand the gravity or the importance of what your astrological chart can do for you?
Well, when you mentioned that astrology popped up into your path, you were probably going through a particularly heavy transit in your life, astrology transit. Okay, because that is what happens. I always say your chart will never change. That is always your roadmap, your spiritual DNA. That is your chart. However, the planets are constantly moving. So at different points on your journey here, there's going to be planets going through houses in your birth chart, which are where areas of life fall under. Okay, so you're going to have planets moving through houses, and sometimes they will stay there for 2 weeks. Sometimes they'll stay there for 2 months, and sometimes they'll stay there for 2 years. And because the planets shift in their orbit and they go retrograde, they go backwards, they go forwards, you get hit sometimes with the same energies several times. And so if it hits a very sensitive point in your chart, like your sun or your moon especially, you're really going to be impacted by that. And that can cause all sorts of, drama, but sometimes it's drama in the best way possible. It reroutes you completely.
Yes.
And this is where fate and free will become so interconnected, because I believe that birth chart, that map, is your fate. However, we all have free will, and the fate part will take us to a certain point. So we're going to, as an astrologer, you're going to look at somebody's chart and you're going to know the cycles that they're going through. And you're going to say, ooh, I think at this juncture, you may be hit with a couple of lessons here. However, let's arm you with the tools based on your unique soul map, your unique planets. Let's arm you with the tools that are going to work best for you to get through this the most unscathed as possible. So it's very unique to everybody else, for everybody's own birth chart. And that's what I always want people to understand. Like when you said about reading your horoscope, about reading the sun sign, you shouldn't even read your sun sign. You should read your rising sign first.
Oh,
really?
And that's probably something that a lot of people aren't even aware of. I'm not aware of that. Read your rising first. Okay.
Correct. And I will check in with both of you next time when you read your rising sign, because I want you to tell me how much of a difference it made for you, truly. Because the rising sign or ascendant, because those two words are interchangeable. The rising sign and the ascendant, think about it like this. We've got 12 signs of the zodiac, and each sign has its own constellation. Every 4 minutes, that ascendant is going to move 1 degree. That sign is going to move 1 degree. So every 2 hours, that means that rising sign shifts into the next sign. And so your exact moment of birth is very important because it calculates the ascendant, which then sets the whole entire chart. So your first house, which is what the ascendant starts, is you. That's your personality. That's your flavor. That's the way that people out in the universe, your energy is perceived and received by others. And it's the lens that you see the world out of. But oftentimes we don't see ourselves that way, right? So it becomes very interesting. But because of the accuracy and the precision of the degrees, your rising sign is really going to be more accurate for you when you're reading your horoscope. Because in the Western tropical zodiac, that's how we do predictive general horoscopes. You always go off the rising sign because it's more accurate for the collective. But when you do, individual readings, you use the rising sign, of course, but it's different in the astrology charts and house systems, and all astrologers use different ones. I use several, so.
I feel like we're getting a masterclass in astrology here. I don't know about you, Liz.
I can talk about it for days.
That has blown me out of the water just saying that. So essentially, if I'm going to look at a reading, look at the one that is Aries rather than Pisces is what I should be doing first. Okay, because I never really knew where
read Aries first.
Yeah. Okay. Love that. That's
what I'm interested to know is that if you were to do my birth chart, would I be able to figure things out like, should I marry this person? Should I live here? How much can you tell me with that birth chart?
Oh my goodness. with an accurate birth chart, we can tell you so many things. So you can come to me or to another astrologer and you can say, I have so-and-so's exact birth data and I have mine. Can we look at this connection and see what's what? And what we would do is, first, it depends on if this is somebody you just met, right? Because if it's somebody that you just met, we're going to look at like the ingredients of the connection, right? The ingredients of the soup. So we're going to take two charts, we overlay them, and that's called synastry. And that's where you look at each individual's planets and how they overlay into the other's chart to see. There's certain planets that if it's romantic, for example, you want to see certain interactions between the moon because then it'll show you how these people relate emotionally. You'll want to see Venus because that's romance and love. It's also money. So that factors into relationships. And then Mars is attraction. It's how you're, how do you act? Are you going to rub each other the wrong way after some time? Or is this going to be a friction that is good? There's so many things that go into it.
Wow.
So that's just like the chemistry portion. And that's nothing. I mean, listen, we meet people every day in this world, right? And we like them or we instantly gel with them, or sometimes we don't, right? It's cool to know maybe why. And then when you are actually in a relationship and you want to know the juice of that relationship, we can actually look at the karma or the purpose of that relationship in many different ways. And that's called a composite chart. And that actually takes form when the relationship is solid. But I personally like to use a composite before the synastry, especially in romantic situations, because I feel like you really get more details into what this relationship is going to be like. And if one individual is not willing to work on their own personal self, their own personal chart, then that relationship, when it gels, isn't going to go very well, right? But then there's also karma. So my famous line to a lot of my clients when they say to me, what would you do? And I always say, and they laugh, I say, I'm not you, so I can't tell you what to do. And I also do not want to interrupt or attach myself to your karma because, there are certain lessons that we all need to learn. And oftentimes pain is a part of that deal, right? So that we can grow. But I also will say, based on these are the pathways. Now you get to choose which way you want to go. And then, that's how you learn. That's how we accrue more karma for the next lifetime. If you believe in that theory, which I obviously do. It's a lot. And we'll see, we get repetitive lessons until it's like we get donked over the head and, oh, I get it now. I won't do that anymore because it doesn't work out.
I have to ask.
It's a long time.
Have you ever, though, just done a chart where you've looked at, a guy and a girl and you've thought, holy shit, these two should just not be together? Has that happened?
Way more times than I can actually tell you.
Oh, no.
And usually... and to be fair, I do have to say this. I believe when we meet certain people, especially when we're much younger, like in our early teenage years, in our 20s, we don't really know ourselves. So we meet people where we're at and we meet them where they are at. But then we evolve, we change, we grow. And so someone goes like this and the other person either stays here or they go like this. And then this person's going like this. And then they meet somebody else and it's like, oh, okay. And because of the nature of the world, of society and the institution of marriage and everything, that makes it uncomfortable to admit that maybe somebody that you were with 30 years ago is not who you should be with today on the soul level. Not saying go blow up your life to smithereens. I don't mean that, but to acknowledge that and maybe work on, okay, well, now I have to decide if I want to stay and grow together with this person in this way or do things differently. So it's funny because I can usually even sense that without the chart. I think most people probably can, but when you see the chart, you're like, ooh, okay. But I can also see why, like what was the draw? What was the karma, right?
Yeah.
Because we can see everything in those charts. Actually, John has said, I've heard him say to people, having your chart done is like, be prepared because it's like somebody is seeing you nude because you see your family patterns in that birth chart. It shows you mom, it shows you dad. And listen, it can be interpreted incorrectly, of course. And there's always the person's perception and experience, but still it's very, very personal. And that all factors into our relationships and our ability to connect to other people or not to connect to other people. So there's a lot that goes, it's like a psychology. I call it your psycho-spiritual roadmap, the birth chart. I've trained a lot of psychiatrists, psychologists, how to work with astrology charts because they find it super helpful.
It's funny on that I think I'd always viewed that you get your astrological chart done and then that's it. But the fact that, time is always moving, the planets are always moving, life circumstances are always changing. So going back, and I think this is definitely reinforced by the conversation in the interview we had with John, it was like still touching base to kind of check in. So not necessarily, oh God, I can't live my life without checking with my astrologer, but almost like, okay, well, what is the year ahead looking like for me? Or what is the next
Right.
quarter looking like for me? Or if and I'll get you to talk about this in a moment, but something
Sure.
big like Saturn returns or things like that you hear people, a lot of things going on about that are going to be, monumental shifts in your life, that maybe those are the times to go and engage with someone. So it's for anyone who's listening, it's not that once and done kind of thing. It's really that it is, if you want to leverage this and use this as a way to guide your path or be able to help you make decisions throughout your life, it is that reconnecting or having your astrological partnership or your guide that is working with you through this. So you're constantly going back and checking in. Do you find is that part of the work that you do, that there are constant clients that you're coming back to, that you're working with
Yes.
hand in hand, really?
Yes. Yeah. It's one of the most beautiful parts of doing this work is when you get to touch somebody's life and it's more than just this transactional, psychic reading. It's like it's a friend, when you get to know somebody like that at an intimate level and they trust you and they come back and, I can think of so many different clients with different situations, but I had one who I found his kidney cancer and he was coming to me for financial advice. And I said,
Wow.
listen, I know you want to talk about this, but I have to talk about this. And he says all the time, I saved his life. He wrote that publicly, so I can say that. But then there's other people who have had things happen where, they've had a tremendous curveball thrown at them that we were not expecting. But then when we go back, we can see how it happened. So it's not always going to tell you exactly, but you can, for the most part, get an idea. But for an example, anybody that's listening or watching right now, if you're between the ages of 27 and 29 years old, or 57 and 59, you're going to be going through your Saturn return. So those years will always stretch you, but that's not bad. It's just about how far you've come along on your journey, what you've learned. Okay, where are you right now, and what are you willing to do? Where are you willing to put the work in? And that is when you come out the other side of that much stronger and much more resilient. I have my own relationship with Saturn, so it's like one of those planets that I understand, although I wish I didn't. So
okay.
And on this note, I have to ask, because I see it all the time, people are saying it's Mercury retrograde. Can you explain what this means and how it impacts us?
So it happens 3 or 4 times per year. So if you think about it from the astronomical perspective, Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. So think about it. When Mercury stations retrograde, it's not really going backwards, but it appears like that from our vantage point here on Earth because of the planet's orbits around the sun. So Mercury rules over communication, its information, the media, emails, texts, the way that we, speak, communicate, perceive, all of that. It also rules over travel and technology. So as you know, we had a little Zoom thing going on before we got in where I was on the wrong link. That's Mercury, because Mercury is about to station retrograde on August 23rd.
Yeah.
In Virgo, in the sign of Virgo. So if you are a Virgo or a Gemini, because Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo, or a Taurus, because you're an earth sign as well, this will probably feel a little bit more Mercury retrograde-ish for you. But again, I always say use the energy of each retrograde wisely because they're all different. So for example, this one is in Virgo. And when this one begins, it's in a messy aspect to the planet Neptune, which can really confuse things, put it that way. It can make things delusional, funky, foggy. So if you think about the planet of communication starting its backspin, proverbial backspin, in a harsh aspect to a planet that already confuses things on its own, it's letting you know that the end of August is probably going to be a little bit, travel-wise, shaky, communication, shaky. So just triple check everything and leave yourself a little bit of extra time and use that time to edit. If you have projects that need to be worked on or revised, it's a great time to do revisions. I would not launch anything new if you could avoid it. Okay, we can't always avoid it, right? But sometimes we can. So it's really just a time to think about the word retrograde, reflect, retract, revise, and then you realign once it's over. So it's not, I don't want to jinx myself and say that it's not that big of a deal, because sometimes it is. But like I said, it is annoying. It's an annoyance. That's basically what it is.
But the knowledge of that, I think the knowledge of when you realize this is happening, you know when this is occurring. And then instead of kind of fighting against it or questioning, why is all this happening? Or why is my tech not working, and getting frustrated, it's like, there's a little bit of gold in the fact that, okay, I know this is happening. So do your tech checks beforehand, or if you're going to send that email, sleep on it before you hit the send. Just thinking through some of those things about communication. So knowing when a Mercury retrograde is going to come, then planning a launch of, if you've got a product or a service that's going out there, thinking to yourself, do I consciously want to do this, or would it be better served, leaving it for a month or whatever it might be. So I know for me, because of my curiosity with this, I have been watching how I respond in Mercury retrogrades and what comes up for me, and just noticing that I'm giving myself a lot more grace. I'm giving myself a lot more, okay, just, calm the farm a little bit, bring it all down. Don't get so kind of up in arms with, why is everything going wrong for me? Especially when you work with tech on a daily basis. So I think that little bit of knowledge for listeners who maybe see this or see it over sensationalized. I think sometimes a lot, you see it in social media feeds. It's like, it's nothing to be worried about. Just work with it. Just work with it. It's more helpful. So are there anything else like that? The Mercury retrograde, the Saturn return, are there any of those other terms in astrology that you think would be beneficial for either myself and Liz to be educated on, or our listeners to be educated on?
So right now, I should also mention that Venus is retrograde, and this one was a big deal. And I think this will maybe clear some energy up for a lot of people that are not familiar with this. Venus is the planet of pleasure, beauty, connection, relationships. She also rules over art and money. Okay, so it's our relationship to our own money. It's the way that we earn money, and it's our self-worth and our value. So Venus is the second planet from the sun, right? So it's the sun, Mercury, and Venus. So Venus only will station retrograde once every 18 months. And the thing is that the last time Venus was retrograde through the sign of Leo was back in 2015, 8 years ago. So from July 25th until September 6th of 2015, Venus was retrograde through the sign of Leo. And Leo is the sign that rules over the heart. Okay, so this is all about heart-centered connections. So when the planet of connectedness moves backwards, retrograde, it kind of mucks all of that up. So relationships, especially if you have strong Leo energy, especially if you have strong Taurus or Scorpio or Aquarius, these individuals have probably really been feeling the heat and the weight of this transit, because right now Venus is retrograde from July 22nd of this year until September 3rd. So you may want to track back to 2015 and if you can, and think to where you were at that point in your life, and are there any repetitive themes, and take it back to your own heart, to your own self-worth, and ask yourself, where am I not showing up for myself? Because that's where it starts. That's where the genuine self-love starts, right? It's got to start here first, and then you can take that out into all of your relationships. It's not just romantic, by the way. It's all relationships. So I do want to share that, because that's a bigger deal than Mercury retrograde. I will say that. Because it happens far less often, right? So it's when it happens, we notice it, we feel it. And this one's been a little messy. Have you been feeling things within your relationships over the last couple months? Yeah.
Oh, yes. Lots on steroids.
And I've been getting a few downloads about relationships, haven't I, Diane?
Yes, definitely.
All sorts of stuff. Crazy.
Yes.
Looking at 2024, are there any kind of predictions energetically that you can make?
Well, it's kind of hard these days with the state of the world. It's really kind of challenging, but I will say we do have the outer planets kind of moving into more harmonizing aspects with each other, and they stay in their signs for a much longer span of time. And they're going to, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and they're going to actually begin to harmonize with one another, which is really helpful for us collectively. But we've also got Pluto, the planet of tremendous power, change, transformation. Just for frame of reference, Pluto was last in the sign of Aquarius in 1776. Okay.
Wow, so a long time ago.
Yes, it's a 248-year orbit for Pluto. And Pluto is now retrograde in Capricorn. I don't want to lose anybody here. It's retrograde in Capricorn. But the thing is, the sign that Pluto resides in, he upturns everything. And Pluto's been in Capricorn since 2008. So he's really been upturning and exposing and trying to build us back up from the ground in the areas of the Capricorn sides of life, which are the government, the banking.
Yes.
I mean, everything. If you think back to all
Transformational
that's gone on,
change. Yeah.
Pluto went into Capricorn and the Great Recession followed immediately. And these are the kind of things that happen. Now Pluto's moving into, already dipped into Aquarius this year, back in March, up until June. And then Pluto stationed retrograde and moved back into Capricorn. But Pluto's going to officially move into the sign of Aquarius in 2024, November of 2024. And it's going to stay there for 22, 24 years. And Aquarius is the sign of technology, space travel, robotics, animatronics. And you see all of these things already with AI. And we see the leaps of aliens, right? Extracurricular activity that falls under the sign of Aquarius. There's a lot of things, and they're already seeing the, kind of like what's coming up in the future. Very innovative and interesting times. But what I keep holding on to, and I always say this to everybody when they come for readings, regardless of what happens out there, because we cannot control that. Yes. We can only control what's going on in here. So I can make predictions all day long about what I feel and I see and I think for the world, but I don't find that beneficial because I feel like it has to start with us, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then from that, it ripples outward. And the one thing I can say is, if you think about history, we've always survived.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's what I hang on to.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying it's not going to be a bumpy ride. It already is. We see this, right? Yeah. But I always say we signed up for this for some crazy reason. Those of us that are here now, we signed up for this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's another reason for doing the chart to help you, that if there's so much external change and so many things that seem on their head, because it's easy to, to go down the rabbit hole of whether it's conspiracy theories or, waving your hands in the air and thinking, what does all this mean? It's like, if we focus on the change that we can, impart in our own lives, then that's, we're better served by doing that. We better serve ourselves and serve others. But if our astrological chart can help us in some way to be able to understand that and navigate that much better, I just think that's a pretty awesome tool to be able to have.
It is. I'll tell you, it completely opened up my world when I realized that I had a Pisces moon and a bunch of my planets in the house of Pisces, because in like this hidden area of my chart, which explained my intuitive abilities from a young age, but also at the same time, the empathetic side of me, like when I was a child, I would throw up because I was so sensitive to energy that I would get sick and I would throw up all the time. It was like a family joke about my throwing up for no reason. And looking back now, I work with a lot of mothers who have very empathic children that really feel everything. And I understand what they're experiencing because I was there. And even as an adult, I remember the first time I went to Disney World, I could not step foot in the park because it was too much energy. And at that time I wasn't as good at like funneling it in and protecting my own, and it was the mall. I can't go in a mall to this day. I can't do it. It's something about the energy of a mall. I just instantly, it's like, nope, I got to get out of here. It's a lot, but I think that we're all able to do that. We all feel each other. I mean, we all feel energy. Just some people are more tuned into it than others, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That energetic soup. It's like when you go into those situations where you can feel so much of the energy, particularly for anyone who is energy sensitive or consider themselves an empath. I do have a question. So another one of the major shifts that has occurred recently, the nodal shift. So I say that like I understand it, but I don't. So what I do know is that, that we have shifted into Aries Libra from a north node, south node perspective. But the fact that that this, so it happened 17th of July, this episode will not likely air until around the October timeframe. So some of the things we've spoken about already, if you're listening to this, just reflect back. It's a good way to look back and say, okay, did that make sense? Were things going on with the Mercury retrograde? But for the nodal shift, my understanding is that's kind of like setting the scene for the next 18 months. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
What can you tell us about that? Because again, I'm just conscious that there's a lot of sensationalism going on through social media and about all of these things. But I know you're very level-headed, you're very grounded, you bring this into the practical realm.
I try.
I'd love to hear what your interpretation of that and anything that we can do to prepare ourselves.
So first of all, from the collective perspective, when the North Node and the South Node are not actual planets.
Yes.
They're actually nodes, they're points, they're calculations of the sun, the moon, and the earth. So and the position. So they're not really planets per se. However, this is where the eclipses occur on the nodes of the moon. Okay, so this is the 18-month cycle. Now the eclipses are going to begin to occur in Aries and Libra. So collectively speaking, the areas of the world that where the eclipse path goes over, which I believe, I'm not sure what part of Australia you are in, but I'm pretty sure that in October, there's one that's going right over you guys. But that doesn't mean anything bad. It just means that, there's certain times in a person's life where there will be changes. And personally speaking, that nodal shift has to be impacting something pretty close in your own birth chart for you to really feel the significance or have big fated changes. Like, so if it's your nodal return, for example, that means your north node's in Aries and your south node was in Libra at birth. And again, because this is an 18-year cycle, if you're about 18 to 19 and a half years old.
So it's 18-year for the return.
18, the nodes shift every 18 months.
Yes.
But every 18 and a half, 19 years, they're going to go back into the same pair of signs. So that means that those that are 18 and 19 and a half now are going to have their nodal return.
Yeah.
Got you.
Okay. So this is where they have opportunities that come into their lives that kind of like set them on track. Think of it that way. That doesn't always have to be settling or unsettling, but it is what it is. And then because of everybody's unique chart, it's very precise. Like I find with the nodal shifting, it's almost always exact to the degree where somebody has a situation occur, especially if it's got to do with family. It might not be them. It could be coming from the outside, but it's always something that impacts them in some capacity and sets their course maybe a little bit differently than they expected, or it puts them on the course they were hoping for. Now, the opposite occurs if your north node's in Libra and your south node's in Aries. That means you're going into your nodal opposition, which is very similar to the return, except think about opposition. You may just be hit with more adjustments that you have to make and things coming at you from the outside that are forcing change upon you and forcing you to grow and reroute yourself or your path. But Aries is the sign, because it's the first sign of the zodiac. Aries is the sign of the individual. So think about Aries, I am. It's all about me, the self, your expression. Libra, the opposite sign, is all about we. It's about partnerships. It's about balance. It's about harmony and restoration. And these are the opposite signs. So we can't be too selfish and we can't be too selfless. We have to find the balance. And for everyone, collectively speaking, that's a really big lesson. But personally speaking, dependent upon where these two planets are in your chart, because even if you don't have any planets in Aries or Libra, they're still going to occupy spaces in your birth chart. And so those nodes are going to be moving through those areas of your birth chart. Am I explaining that? Okay, I know it's a lot of information.
You're just making me want to get my birth chart.
Absolutely. And it is. But I think even, if I look at from a personal perspective, what I think, what I'm feeling energetically, what I'm going through life-wise at the moment, that shift has been palpable recently in terms of the balancing between me. So personally, kind of coming out of a hermit mode situation. So almost like like a lot of change going on, being in hermit mode, to now balancing that out with, okay, well, what is my bigger contribution? What is my, my relationship to my business, to others? That balancing out is definitely happening to me. And some of it is happening in a way that is, okay, I have some control over it. Others, it's just, okay, there's things that are being balanced, whether I like it or not. So I know I have felt and have been curious about this, I guess the timing, not that I'm handing it all over and saying that this is exactly what I know it is, but my curiosity is absolutely piqued at the fact that this is a shift and the fact that it's an 18-month cycle, that it kind of sets up, well, okay, if we're going to expect more of this, again, it's that helping myself not resist the changes that are coming and taking personal responsibility for myself to kind of say, well, okay, well, am I clear about what I want out of this? Or, where is my path going? And if you're someone who has your astrological chart, then you've got a wealth of information that is able to help inform those decisions and those steps forward that you take, which I think is fantastic. So yeah, I'm like Liz, I'm like all excited, because you don't want to get your chart done and then have it gather dust. It's like, I think a lot of people, that I definitely did that because I know the first time I had my chart done, I didn't know my time of birth. And
Yeah.
I do feel that this was actually done in a way that, okay, here's some information that's a little bit interesting. It might not be everything, but I'm a person who
Right.
likes to go down the rabbit hole of, knowledge and exploration and wanting to understand all of this. So it's almost like we're only giving you this little bit right now, because otherwise you'll just get consumed with too much information. So it is, I just feel that these are things that are living and breathing, and that, you need to incorporate into your life if it's something that calls to you, like if you feel that
Right.
it is something that is for you.
You're Aries rising, you said?
Yes, yeah, for me.
Okay. So just quickly, I'll tell you, with Aries being your first house, that means Libra is your seventh house. So that's much more impactful for you, because this is going to be all about your self-expression, what you want to do out in the world, the way you're presenting yourself. And if you're frustrated at certain elements of that, you're going to be likely making changes here, and they're going to probably be coming into your life by other people that you're meeting, or maybe other partnerships. It doesn't have to be romantic, but it could be all different types of partnerships, where you're making agreements consciously or unconsciously with them, with the universe, about how is this going to make you be most authentically you. It's going to be an interesting time for you. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities there for you as well. So, but you're dealing with Saturn, because you're
100% resonates.
That's Saturn. Yeah. So a lot of lessons there for you. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I know you.
That
had
sounds exciting.
To
Look, this is kind of slightly off, but I'd love your view on this, because the only real astrology that I've ever delved into at all has been Chinese astrology. And, I remember the first time reading that I was a monkey, as an example. I'm born on the year of the monkey. And it resonated so much, So
yes.
The Chinese astrology stuff that I've read are just on point. But what is Chinese astrology? Is it different to the astrology you're talking about? And can you explain?
So I'll be honest with you. I don't know too much about the Chinese astrology, other than the fact that I'm a monkey as well. But Vedic astrology, which is, yeah, I know. Vedic astrology, which is based off Hinduism, Hindu astrology, I've actually been diving more and more into, because it's really interesting and it's really accurate. And I did not resonate with it when I was younger, because my focus was on just Western astrology. But now that I'm older and more advanced on my journey, the more I look to the Vedic charts, or the sidereal charts for people, because I incorporate a bunch of different charts when I do readings. A lot of times the resonance is it's uncanny, but it's very easy to get overwhelmed. So I try to stick with one mode, but I have to say the Chinese astrology, the Chinese horoscope, I'm not that familiar with, other than I do find it very accurate as well. So they're all accurate. It's just based off different zodiac systems.
Got you. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. And just one extra thing here. How does numerology play any type of a crossover or part in astrology?
It does, but again, I know more about numerology when it comes to tarot cards.
Yeah.
But it does play into it by cycles and by timing. I feel like it all connects, but I am not a numerologist by any means, and I don't pretend to be. So numbers are not really my thing beyond the basics. So, but yes, they do factor. Degrees, for example, if we're talking numbers within your astrology chart, a lot of astrologers use something called the degree theory, where they base certain planets at certain degrees. They deem them as, bad or good or evil or whatnot. I don't really subscribe to that theory. There are certain things that I do find to be very true. Like if somebody has a planet at 0 degree, it's like a very pure expression of that planet of that soul for that planet in this lifetime. It's like a clean slate. Whereas if it's at the 29th degree, which is the anaretic degree, it's a crucial turning point for the soul with that specific planet. And there's lessons there as well that the soul has already mastered. So they're very tired of it and worn out of the energy, but it's very karmic. So that's really the two places where I will say degrees matter, right? If that's what you're referring to. But as far as numerology goes with astrology, I will say this, they always parallel each other, because I hear numerologists give reports and we'll go back and forth like, yep, that's Venus. And so I know there's more to it. So like we could do like a whole forecast, like a numerologist and an astrologer, and I guarantee we're going to get the same information, right? A tarot reader, we're going to all get the same information, but we're going to be coming at it from totally different ways.
Yeah.
So it's
just through a different lens.
Yes. I'm going to have to explore that further though. Yes. Now I want to know. I want to know more with that.
I love that because, Liz, I had a similar question formulating in my mind, which is around astrology links to human design, because there's a lot of human design that is rooted deep in astrology. Is that something that you're anyway familiar with or see any parallels with?
Meaning like the
I know that people can go and have their human design chart done, or you can have an astrological chart done. And I know human design has a lot of astrological elements. It has other things as well, but
it does. That kind of reminds me of like Akashic records as well. Like there's so many different modalities where I've actually worked with an Akashic records reader, and the astrology piece mimics the Akashic piece, but it's so different. But yet it's the same message. It's wild. And so I would imagine, I have not had the human design experience, but I would imagine that it would work the same way, where you're going to look at these pieces of information and see your path and say, how could it be that I could have all of these roadways leading me to the same destination, right? Like the vehicle's there. It's telling me this is my lesson here. It's amazing to me.
I love that because it's like it is tapping into that universal information. So there is universal information and the translation, or whether it's the chart, whether it's the reading, whether it's the numerology, whether it's the astrology, but each of us gets called or pulled to certain things that if we want to tap into that universal information, that universal energy, we can do that in different ways. If I'm a person who's come to you for a reading, you've done my astrological chart, what does that look like then? Or what would you recommend for people to how to, I don't mean live by your astrological chart, but live with it, or to keep it alive, or to have it as a reference point? What would that look like on whether it's a daily basis, weekly basis, rather than putting it on the shelf and it collects dust and I no longer kind of do anything with it?
So your basic placements are going to tell you how you respond, react, how you receive everything that happens to you, right? So for example, your moon is going to tell you the lens at which you feel and the way that you want to be cared for, also how you care for others. But that doesn't mean that's how you are cared for, but that's how you need to be cared for, right? That's how you need to be fed. So if you don't know that about yourself, how can anybody else do that for you, right? So just even knowing little things like your planetary placements, I don't think that's ever anything you keep on the shelf, because I still do it to this day, where something will happen and I will say, oh, that's my Mercury. That's my Mercury conjunct the sun, conjunct Chiron, doing it again. Like I know that there's certain things in that chart that I have to consciously work on because I'm hardwired to react a certain way and I don't want to do that anymore, right? Like anger or whatever it is for someone else. But then the thing is, when somebody comes back, each time it's going to be different. And I always say, I think, every astrologer, every intuitive is unique. Their craft, the way they work their craft. And for me, I don't follow a script because I can't. And that's the thing. It's like when somebody comes to me, they may come to me for astrology, but guess what? If that day their grandmother who's in the spirit world wants to guide their session, that's what's going to happen. And then sometimes I'm just going to get a bunch of psychic information and I may not even have time to look at the chart. So I mean, that doesn't, I will look at the chart, but a lot of times before I can even get to the chart, I'm already getting pulled somewhere else with the individual. And I always say, whatever needs to happen is what's going to happen for that person. And it usually is the way that it works. So, I guess I'm not really answering your question, but
I love that.
No, I do. I feel it is that so if I can play back what I'm understanding from this, it is you get your chart done. There will be things like, I know for myself, when I went through it, there were things that were like almost like alarm bells on it. It was like, this is the statement, almost as if it was jumping off the page in block capitals, highlighted already, to say things that really resonated. And you realize that, if I don't know, as an example with the moon, if there's, moon sign, that if I don't realize these are some needs that I have, and I'm not expressing those in a relationship, whether that's in romantically or whether it's a business one, it's the fact that you now have that information. You can't unknow that. Now that it's kind of been there in bold and block capitals, it's going to do that for you. I know when I had my reading as well, the lady who did my reading, which was fantastic, it was more business focused, but she did say to me, she goes, she was grappling with the words, and of course this is where her intuitive nature was coming in as well. It was like, she goes, it's like you're a mountain goat, that you have just overcome so many obstacles to get to the top of the mountain. She goes, and you're there, you're constantly getting to the top of the mountain. She goes, but that's not enough for you. You now need to go back down the mountain. You've got to help everybody else get back up the mountain as well. And when she said that, I was absolutely floored. And I was like, that about sums up my life, like that, and everything I do. So she was able to succinctly say, but again, that's the chart, that's the intuitive nature, like all the gifts that you're talking about that come to bear on the day. And the fact that now I have that, because I'm a visual person, I have that visual image of me being a mountain goat. And it's like, and it is, there's something lovely to think about. Yeah, that little statement, that little phrase, there was lots of things that came out in the reading. But that for me is like, it just felt like, yes, that's the essence of who I am and what I do, regardless of the obstacles along the way. So I do think that when you go and have your chart and your reading done, there are so many things that will just stand out for you that you can't unknow after the fact, that you will then incorporate those into your, the choices you make, your decisions throughout life, or, it will help navigate your path one way or another, should you never naturally incorporate it in, or think that, I'm sitting down and I'm doing a 3-month forward strategy and I'm going to take into account my astrological chart, even if you don't. Well, you should. That. I agree. Like, I feel like that's where I'm moving to. It's more that I've got all of this information. It's a good validation standpoint. It doesn't mean that that's how I'm going to 100% live my life. I still have my free will. I still have my choice. Yes. But I love anything that is a reference point, or that is almost like a brainstorm with yourself. It's like, okay, is this resonating for me? Does this make sense? Am I considering different perspectives? And I feel like the astrological charts and having your whole chart done is something that it just gives you a wealth of information.
Oh yeah.
A few years ago, sorry, Lisa, you go.
No, go ahead.
Just a quick mention, and it's something that John Edward actually mentioned. A few years ago, when my son was quite young, he had a few challenges, and intuitively, I was picking up on things around my son. But I was really pulled one day to get his birth chart done. And honestly, not only did it give me such validation, but it provided me with such a sense of relief, because it was literally like someone had explained my son on a piece of paper. And I just knew then all of those motherly intuitive messages on dealing with situations and his personality and, the challenges that he was kind of going through. I just understood it. And I remember John Edwards said the same. Both of his children, he has their birth chart, and he makes sure they understand it and they follow it. And as a mum, I just can't even say that really how much that helped. And it's really encouraging me to go and find that, because yes, mine is on the shelf collecting dust. Do you do that a lot for kind of parents?
All the time. And I love that more and more they're coming in wanting it done when they're younger, very young. Like I've done it for people where the child was 6 months old, 10 months old, 5, because if you think about it, if they are aware of that child's true emotional nature beyond what they feel, like really knowing, hey, you can't discipline these two the same, because this one's not going to respond to that where this one will. Yeah. So it becomes, it's easier for the parent to relate to the child, especially if there's some challenges there between the parent-child dynamic already to begin with, which many times there are, because it's karmic, as we know. I'll be funny here and say we don't choose our family, but we do, because it's very karmic.
It's true. It's true.
Yes, it's true. So knowing that this is why you'll actually find in families with several children, not a lot, but some of the children will have like sun square sun, which will indicate a tension there between the two basic parts of their personality. Or you'll see sun square moon or moon square sun. Like there's always these links within the family dynamic, where that's why two people really seem to gel. And then there's a third person that just can't like fit in with that group because they're hardwired differently. So there's a lot that really goes into it. But I'm of the belief that when you make that conscious, right, when that unconscious material becomes conscious, you can then redirect outcomes by altering how you respond or how you behave, because it means something to you to work it out. And that's why I always tell my clients, if there's a sibling that you don't speak to because you have different political views, let's just say, because that's a big thing I see all the time, but they're a good person and you love them, but you can't get past that. To me, that's silly. that's not a true toxicity there. But if somebody is abusive towards you and you want to not engage with them, I understand that and I respect that. But if it's something silly, to me, that's your karma. You're supposed to figure out how to interact with this person that has very different viewpoints than you do. You see how that works? So it's very, very different. And I love what you said about when you had your reading done with the intuitive piece, because I always talk about, I read this book, it's called Predictive Astrology by Bernadette Brady. And I love this book because to me, it describes my journey with astrology. But she talks about, there's a fable of the eagle and the lark. And she talks about how the lark was this beautiful bird, obviously bird, and she had a gorgeous voice. And all she wanted to do was get up to the heavens so she could sing for the gods. And she could not do it. She would try and she'd go up on the top of a mountain and she'd flap her wings and she just couldn't do it. And she would see that she saw this eagle soaring really high in the sky. And she watched the eagle and she just kept thinking to herself, if I could just get as high as that eagle, I could get to the heavens and sing for the gods. But she couldn't. And then one day she watched the eagle land. She went over to the eagle and she bravely explained her dilemma. And the eagle was very eager to get her on his back. And together he took her up to the heavens. And he was embarrassed. He could reach the heavens, but was embarrassed to sing for the gods because he didn't have a good voice. So he was delighted to help her get up there. So he soared up high and she's watching down below and she's nervous, but she knows her moment is coming. And when they get up there, she gets up on the eagle's back and she sings. And long story short, the gods are, enthralled by her beautiful voice. And they're so impressed with the eagle's ability to get her there and the strength. So the two of them worked together to get her up there to sing for the gods. And why am I saying all this? Because in that predictive astrology book, she talks about how the eagle is like, think about the technical side of astrology. That's where the mathematics come in. That's where the astronomy comes in. It's a science, right? Where the lark is the art. She's the intuition. And those two modalities by themselves are very valid and very valuable. But when you put them together, you soar to the heavens and the reading becomes much more divinely guided because you're using both pieces. And so what you just said just reminded me of that. And I resonate with that so much. And I love that she used the mountain goat because Capricorn, the sign of Capricorn, is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is the goat that climbs the mountain. I use that analogy all the time. Climbs the mountain, gets to the top of the mountain, reaches its pinnacle. Yeah, it's crazy, the parallels. I love that.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Absolutely. I love how you are educating us so much on this. I just feel like we could talk forever on this, and we're only barely scratching the surface.
I know, and it's hard because there's so much I want to say, like when you say about leaving your I almost just said your elf on the shelf. I meant to say your chart on the shelf. Jeez. When you have your chart on the shelf, like you mentioned before, when you have a passing planet like Pluto, for example, Pluto is very profound and he will bring things up like grief and loss and trauma, and not always, but it kind of forces you to really face your shadow side, something that you don't want to deal with, or maybe you've suppressed it or even repressed it, whatever it is. And like, let's say Pluto moves to your moon and is hanging out on your moon for, quite some time, and it's in your 8th house of grief. You may actually experience that point in your life, literal endings of people in your reality, or it will be on the emotional level, or you could have past pains and traumas coming up to the surface, making you question your own sanity because you're like, I feel like I'm going to have a breakdown. So if you had somebody telling you, hey, listen, this is what's coming up right now, you may be tested, you may be challenged. This might be a great time to go into some kind of talk therapy. Maybe you want to do some past life regression, whatever it is. Just having that tool is so helpful because I've worked with people who are in the middle of Pluto breakdowns and it was not easy for them. And just even knowing you're going to come out of it, it's going to be okay. That those pieces, just those glimmers of hope and possibility are so helpful to a soul that feels like they're stuck, or they're worse yet. I've worked with people that didn't want to be on this earth anymore. Yeah. And that's very challenging to work with somebody like that, because you know that at any given moment, you may say something that could really, you don't want to, you want to make sure that what you're saying to them is going to help them to try to stay here and know that there's hope, right? That they can move through this, that this is going to change, that this is going to clear. So it's a lot of responsibility that comes with it as well. But if you can leave everybody that you work with one piece of information that made them smile or give them hope, even in the most challenging of circumstances, then you've done your job.
That is so beautiful. So
I
beautiful.
can see why you are one of John Edward's favorite people, Lisa.
He's one of my favorite people too. He's great. He's one of everybody's favorite people, right?
Yes, he
Absolutely.
is. He's amazing. And that is just so amazing. I can imagine that our listeners right now are just popping their hands up and going, where can we find you? Where can our listeners go to check out having a reading?
So my website is my name, lisasalvatore.com. And I have my calendars online. I open up sessions every month or so. You'll see new sessions that come up there. And there's details there that tell you I do 45 or 90-minute sessions. And I do a deep dive or an overview. And everything is listed there. So you can find it all on my website, lisasalvatore.com. Yeah. And I'm on Instagram. Yeah. So,
and we will post all of your links as well in our show notes. So for anybody that needs it, head there now. And I guess, I just want to say thank you so much. I have learned so much today. And I just feel like what I'm going to take away is that if I can go away and go and get my birth chart done, it's almost like my life Bible, that place that I can turn to prepare, to understand, to feel relief, and to feel excitement about the future as well. So I think it's something that we should all do. And thank you so much, Lisa. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome. Can I leave them with one resource if they wanted to look up their own astrology? There's a wonderful book. It's a workbook. It's called Astrology for Yourself. And it's by Demetra George and Douglas Blash. You can get it on Amazon. It's a great workbook to start if you want to print off your own birth chart, which you can do for free at astro.com, ASTRO. It's free. You can pull up your own birth chart and look, there's a table underneath that will tell you planets and the signs that they're in. The planets and the signs that they're in. And then you can go and get that workbook. And if you want to work through it yourself first, just to kind of see, start with the big three, the sun, the moon, and the rising sign. And just dig into that. And I guarantee you'll find out so much, and a lot of things will click, especially if you've never done that before.
Thank you, because
I'm going to do that now.
You're welcome.
We'll both be geeking out on it. So Liz and I can just imagine once we do, we'll be having these meetings with each other or these text messages saying, oh, I just did this. So you have absolutely given us, and we love giving our listeners as many practical tips as we possibly can. Yeah. So that is a huge one. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
That's it for another episode.
Thank you for listening. Did you know that we are building a movement of 1 million people who are spiritual as fuck? We would love for you to join us. You can start by leaving us a review on Apple Podcast. Every month, I'm going to intuitively choose one person and do a psychic reading for you. So
follow us on Instagram, send in your stories and topic suggestions, and join the movement
at spiritual.a.f. Until next time.
This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.